The document that changed everything was never supposed to survive. It was a 3-page PDF, formatted with the careful precision of someone who had taught himself what professional looked like from YouTube tutorials and borrowed library books. The header read, Vulnerability Disclosure Report, submitted in good faith. At the bottom, a name, Darius Cole, grade 11. Student ID 84271. Timestamp, October 14th, 3:47 p.m. The document had been emailed to the Riverstone Unified School District's IT department, copied to the district's technology director, and forwarded, with a hand-delivered printed copy, to Darius's computer science teacher. For 6 years, the original email sat unacknowledged in a district server archive, not deleted, not acted upon, just buried. 6 years later, a federal investigator pulled it up on a Tuesday morning in March, read it twice, and reportedly sat back in her chair and said nothing for a full 30 seconds. Because every single vulnerability Darius Cole had identified in that document at 16 years old on a school-issued Chromebook in October was still there. Every single one. Unpatched, unaddressed, waiting. And in the intervening years, 4,312 students, 847 staff members, and the parents and guardians of nearly every household in the Riverstone district had their personal data exposed in a ransomware attack that cost the district $14.2 million to resolve. $14 million. The same amount it would have cost, according to every credible estimate that followed, approximately nothing to fix. This is the story of what happened. How a 16-year-old's act of responsibility was treated as a crime. How an institution protected its ego instead of its students. And how the truth, stubborn, patient, time-stamped, found its way back. Darius Cole grew up in the kind of house where books were stacked on every flat surface because there was never quite enough shelf space. His mother, Cheryl Cole, worked as a patient services coordinator at Meridian General Hospital, a job that required, as she described it to people who asked, knowing exactly how every system worked and exactly who to call when it didn't. She was precise, methodical. She kept paper records of everything long after the hospital moved to digital. It was a habit she had developed the hard way over many years of being a black woman in a bureaucratic institution, and she had passed it down to her son without ever having to say it directly. Darius was 11 when he wrote his first line of code. It was a simple HTML page that turned his name into blinking green text on a black background, something he had seen in a movie about hackers and decided, with complete seriousness, that he needed to recreate. He was 12 when he had worked through 3 full online programming courses on his own time, staying up past midnight in a house where his mother woke at 5:30 every morning and never once told him to turn the screen off. She trusted the direction his mind was moving. She just asked that he tell her where it was going. He was 13 when he built a weather application that actually pulled real API data, hosting it on a free server under a username that no longer exists. 14 when he started reading about cybersecurity. Not because he wanted to break into things. That distinction would matter enormously in the years ahead, and it cannot be overstated. Darius Cole was not interested in destruction. He was interested in how things held together, and more specifically in what happened when they didn't. The gap between the design of a system and the reality of its performance. The space where things slipped through. He found that space fascinating in the way that some people find crossword puzzles fascinating, or the way a structural engineer looks at a bridge and thinks, quietly and involuntarily, about the points of failure. By 15, he had a corner of his bedroom his mother called the lab, 2 monitors propped on a stack of textbooks, a second-hand mechanical keyboard he had saved for 4 months to buy, researching it obsessively before committing, a wall covered in color-coded sticky notes, each one a concept, a vulnerability type, a coding principle he was working to master. Yellow for things he understood, orange for things he was still turning over, pink for things that made him uneasy in the productive way, the way a problem makes you uneasy when you know you're close to something real. There were very few pink notes. He applied to Riverstone Academy, a competitive public magnet school in the district, and was admitted on academic merit. His application essay was about encryption. His mother printed the acceptance letter and put it in a binder she kept for important documents. At Riverstone, he found his footing in the computer science program run by Mr. Emmanuel Okafor, a Nigerian-American teacher in his late 30s, who had spent 7 years in enterprise software development before returning to the classroom. Mr. Okafor assigned problems that did not have single correct answers and graded on the quality of reasoning rather than the tidiness of solutions. He recognized Darius within the first 2 weeks of junior year. "There are students who know how to follow instructions," Mr. Okafor would say later, in a written declaration that became one of the most significant documents in the case. "And then there are students who look at a system and immediately start asking why it was built that way." Darius was the second kind. That quality is rarer than most people realize, and when you see it, you remember it. The two fell into a rhythm. After-class conversations, extension problems, recommended resources. Darius began sitting in the front row, not because any rule required it, but because he wanted to be close to the whiteboard. He was 16, 9 weeks into his junior year, when he found the vulnerability. It started, as most important things in Darius Cole's life started, with a question. The Riverstone Unified School District used a student information portal called EduConnect, a third-party platform licensed by the district for managing grades, attendance, assignments, and parent communications. Students accessed it daily. Teachers built their workflow around it. The district's entire academic record infrastructure ran through it. Darius was using EduConnect one evening in mid-October to submit a lab report when the page returned an error. Not a standard browser error. Something unusual, a partial back-end database response that had leaked through the error message and was visible in the browser's developer console. In a properly configured system, those messages are suppressed before they reach the user's screen. In EduConnect, as deployed by Riverstone Unified, they were not. He stared at the console output for approximately 40 seconds. Then he opened a new tab. What Darius found over the following 3 hours, working carefully, methodically, documenting each step as he went, was not the product of malicious intent. It was the product of 2 years of dedicated self-study applied to a system that had been allowed to fall badly behind. The Riverstone District's EduConnect installation was running a version of the platform that was 4 full years out of date. The licensing contract had been renewed without any requirement to apply updates. As a result, the portal contained a well-documented SQL injection vulnerability, the kind that had appeared on the OWASP Top 10 list of common web application security risks for years running, a list Darius had read so many times he could produce it from memory. Through this vulnerability, accessible to anyone with a student login and sufficient technical knowledge, the following information was exposed. Student grade history spanning 8 academic years, student personal, identification numbers, the home addresses of every enrolled student, payroll records and social security numbers for 214 district staff members, and administrative password credentials for the district's internal network. Darius did not download any of this. He did not copy it, share it, or use it in any way. He closed every tab he had opened. He sat back from the keyboard and looked at the wall of sticky notes for a long moment. Then he opened a Google Doc and started writing. Vulnerability Disclosure Report, submitted in good faith. He worked until past 2 in the morning. The finished document was 3 pages single-spaced, with precise technical descriptions of each vulnerability he had identified, the specific methods used to locate them, And, this is the section that still moves people when they read it in full, a portion titled Recommended Remediation, which outlined exactly how the district could address each problem with direct links to the relevant patch, documentation, and update guides. He also included a paragraph at the beginning of the document that read, "I am submitting this report because I believe it is the right thing to do. I have not accessed, downloaded, or used any personal information. My only goal is to make sure the school systems are safe for students and staff." He printed 3 copies the following morning before school, emailed the document to the district IT department's general inbox at 11:32 p.m. the night before, emailed a copy to the district technology director, and handed the 3rd copy in person to Mr. Okafor before first period on a Thursday morning. Mr. Okafor read the first page standing in the hallway outside his classroom. He looked up at Darius with an expression that Darius later described in testimony as the way someone looks when they're proud and worried at exactly the same time. "He told me it was excellent work," Darius recalled. "And then he said, 'Let me know what they say back.' I remember thinking that was a strange thing to say, like he already knew they might not say anything good." IT Director Carl Weiss had held his position at Riverstone Unified for 11 years. He was, by the accounts of multiple colleagues who would later speak on record, a competent administrator of existing systems, reliable with renewals, responsive to help desk tickets, good at keeping the day-to-day infrastructure humming along without incident. He was not, by any assessment that would surface in the years ahead, a cybersecurity professional. His background was in network administration. He had never worked through a responsible disclosure before. He received Darius's email on a Thursday morning. According to records produced in Discovery, he forwarded it to Vice Principal Derek Stanton within 40 minutes of opening it, with a single line of commentary attached. Student claims to have found vulnerabilities. Possible unauthorized access. Recommend disciplinary review. Did not read the remediation section. He did not forward the report to the district's external IT vendor. He did not consult the district's legal counsel about responsible disclosure protocols, which had been a recognized standard practice in the cybersecurity industry for over a decade. He did not acknowledge receipt to Darius. What he did was feel threatened. Principal Helen Marsh called Darius to her office on Friday afternoon, 1 business day after the email was sent. She was 61 years old, 23 years in education administration, the kind of institutional leader who wore her authority with the ease of long familiarity. Her office walls held framed photographs of every graduating class she had overseen at Riverstone. She believed in this school. She had built it in her mind into something worth protecting. She had not read Darius's disclosure document. She had read Carl Weiss's 1-sentence summary. "Darius," she said, according to Darius's account and the corroborating account of Vice Principal Stanton, who was present, "do you understand that accessing school computer systems in an unauthorized manner is a very serious offense?" Darius explained calmly that he had accessed the portal through his own student login, credentials that were by definition authorized, that he had not done anything outside the scope of normal student access, that he had documented everything and submitted it through proper channels, that he had spoken to Mr. Okafor, that the whole point of the document was to help the school. Principal Marsh's expression did not change. She slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. It was a 10-day suspension notice, the stated reason, suspected unauthorized access to district computer systems, under investigation. You need to understand what just happened in that room. A 16-year-old who had done everything right, every single thing, was handed a punishment before anyone had read the evidence he submitted. Darius looked at the notice. He read it twice. Then he looked up and asked, in a voice that was steady in a way that cost him something. "Can I have a copy of that?" She gave him one. He folded it carefully and placed it in the front pocket of his backpack. He called his mother from the school parking lot. Cheryl Cole arrived at Riverstone Academy at 1:15 p.m. that Friday. She brought with her a printed copy of Darius's 3-page vulnerability disclosure report, a printed copy of the email send confirmation, showing the document had been transmitted to the district IT inbox at 11:32 p.m. the previous Wednesday, and her binder. The meeting with Principal Marsh lasted 47 minutes and resolved nothing. Marsh maintained that Darius had accessed systems in an unauthorized manner. Cheryl pointed out precisely that he had used his own student credentials, which constituted authorized access by definition. Marsh said the manner and purpose of access went beyond what was permitted. Cheryl asked her to identify the specific district policy that defined this boundary. Marsh said she would need to follow up. What Cheryl did not yet know, what none of them knew in that meeting, was that Carl Weiss had spent Thursday and Friday on the phone with the district's legal team, framing the situation not as a student who had performed responsible security research, but as a student who had penetrated district systems and needed to be handled as a potential threat. The district's legal team had in turn contacted local law enforcement. On the following Tuesday, day 4 of Darius's suspension, 2 officers from the Millhaven Police Department arrived at the Cole residence at 7:48 a.m. They arrested Darius on a charge of unauthorized access to a computer system, a misdemeanor under the state's juvenile code. He was 16 years old. He was wearing his gray hoodie. A bowl of cereal sat half-finished on the kitchen counter. Cheryl Cole stood in the front doorway of her home and watched her son walk to a police vehicle with his hands behind his back. She didn't make a sound while they could still see her. She waited until the car turned the corner. Then she went inside, opened her binder, and started making calls. This is the moment that defines what institutions do with the truth, when the truth makes them look bad. Not the finding of the vulnerability. This, a child arrested for doing the right thing. Mr. Okafor submitted a written statement to the district administration that same afternoon. It confirmed that Darius had shown him the disclosure report before submitting it to the IT department. It stated clearly that the document represented legitimate security research conducted responsibly and ethically. It said, in the direct language of a former software engineer who knew exactly what he was describing, that Darius had not only done nothing wrong, he had done something that most professional security firms charge tens of thousands of dollars to produce. He requested that his statement be placed in the official record of the matter. It was received. It was filed. It was not acted upon. The juvenile charge against Darius Cole was dropped 9 weeks later. The county prosecutor's office had reviewed the file and determined there was insufficient basis for prosecution. The assistant prosecutor's internal memo noted that the student appeared to have acted in the manner of a responsible disclosure, consistent with established cybersecurity practice. A copy of this memo would later be entered into evidence in the civil case. By the time the charge was dropped, Darius had already been transferred. Riverstone Academy's expulsion committee convened in November. Mr. Okafor testified in person. Cheryl Cole presented her binder. The prosecutor's memo declining charges was on the table. Despite all of it, Principal Marsh's recommendation held weight in that room, and the committee, while declining to formally expel Darius, approved what they called a voluntary transfer agreement. In practice, it meant the same thing. Darius was reassigned to Westfield Alternative Learning Center, the district school designated for students who had been removed from mainstream programs under disciplinary circumstances. Westfield had a single computer lab with 14 machines, 9 of which functioned reliably. It offered no cybersecurity curriculum, no AP computer science, no version of Mr. Okafor. Darius completed his junior and senior years at Westfield. He graduated with a 3.8 GPA, which his mother would later describe as the most deliberate act of defiance I have ever witnessed from a human being, because it would have been so much easier to fall apart. He was not valedictorian. He was not able to pursue the regional robotics scholarship he had been shortlisted for before the suspension. The application required an endorsement from the student's current school principal. He did not receive a recommendation from Helen Marsh. He enrolled at Carver State University on a partial academic scholarship and federal grant aid. He covered the remaining gap by working 20 hours a week at a campus network support desk throughout his undergraduate years. He studied information security. He graduated in 3.5 years. He did not speak publicly about what had happened. He didn't post about it, didn't contact reporters, didn't file complaints. He told almost no one. "I was angry for a long time," he would say later, in the testimony that became one of the most quoted passages of the civil case. "Then I was mostly tired. Then I was just working. You don't stop because of what they did to you. You keep going, because the only thing worse than what happened would be letting it be the last word." By the time Darius Cole was 22, he was a junior security analyst at Vertex Shield, a mid-sized cybersecurity consultancy operating out of the city of Harmon. He was known among his colleagues for documentation habits that bordered on legendary. Every incident logged, every finding time-stamped, every recommendation cross-referenced with its supporting evidence. His supervisor, a 12-year industry veteran named Marcus Webb, told him once that his reports were better formatted than the company's client contracts. Darius took this as a straightforward compliment and moved on. He had his own apartment, 2 monitors, upgraded now, a mechanical keyboard that had cost him significantly more than the one from high school and was worth every cent, a digital system of color-coded notes replacing the sticky note wall, but the same logic underneath it: yellow, orange, and a very small number of pink. He and Mr. Okafor had maintained contact. They had dinner twice a year, a ritual that had started during Darius's first year at Carver and had continued without interruption since. It had become, over time, less mentor and student and more something harder to name. 2 people who had been through the same thing from different angles and who understood something about each other because of it. On an evening in early February, Darius 22, Okafor now teaching at a community college, having left Riverstone 4 years after Darius's transfer. They were at their regular Ghanaian restaurant near the university when Okafor mentioned, almost incidentally, that he'd heard the Riverstone district was having some kind of IT trouble, something he'd seen referenced in a regional education newsletter. He didn't know the details. Darius noted it, filed it, ordered his food. He didn't think about it again for 3 weeks. The ransomware attack on Riverstone Unified School District broke publicly on a Wednesday in late February. A local television station ran a brief segment. District computer systems had been encrypted by a ransomware group. Student and staff data was potentially compromised. The district was working with third-party specialists to assess the damage and restore operations. The statement from the district superintendent was careful and largely uninformative. Darius saw the segment on his phone during a lunch break at work. He put the phone face down on the break room table, finished his meal, disposed of the container, walked back to his desk, sat down, opened his laptop. Over the following 2 hours, he researched everything that had been reported publicly about the attack. The ransomware group, a known criminal outfit with a documented history of targeting under-resourced public institutions, had gained initial access through a web application vulnerability. The entry point, according to the technical details that had been made public in the initial disclosure, was the district's student portal, an unpatched SQL injection vulnerability. Darius read that sentence 4 times. Then he went home that evening, opened the external hard drive he kept in the bottom drawer of his home office desk and navigated to a folder he had not opened in 6 years. Inside it, a PDF, 3 pages, vulnerability disclosure report submitted in good faith. Darius Cole, grade 11. October 14th, 11:32 p.m. He called his mother. Cheryl picked up on the second ring. He told her what he had found, what the news was reporting, what the entry point was. There was a silence on the line that lasted several seconds. "I still have the printed copy," she said, "and the binder." Of course she did. The breach at Riverstone Unified affected 4,312 current and former students and 847 staff members across the district. The exposed data included Social Security numbers, home addresses, medical accommodation records for students with documented disabilities, financial aid documentation, and payroll histories. The ransomware group demanded $1.2 million in cryptocurrency. The district, on advice of counsel, declined to pay. Within 2 weeks, the stolen data was listed for sale on a dark web marketplace. The FBI Cyber Division and the State Attorney General's office opened a joint investigation into the district's data security practices within 10 days of the breach becoming public. What investigators found, over the course of a 12-week forensic review, was a pattern of negligence that was difficult to characterize as anything other than institutional recklessness. EduConnect had issued a critical security patch addressing the SQL injection vulnerability within 30 days of Darius Cole's original disclosure, a patch the Riverstone district had never applied. The IT department had received 11 automated notification emails from the platform vendor over the subsequent 6 years, alerting them to outstanding security updates. All 11 remained in Carl Weiss's inbox, unread. And then, in the archived email records pulled from the district's server backup, investigators found the document. The original disclosure, email, sent from Darius Cole's student account, received by the district AT inbox at 11:32 p.m., October 14th. The PDF attached, fully intact. What she didn't know yet, what none of them knew yet, was that this 3-page document had been sitting in a server archive for 6 years, fully preserved, fully time-stamped, waiting for exactly this moment. Special Agent Dana Prescott, 15 years in cybercrime investigation, reviewed the email on a Tuesday morning. She read the attached PDF. She then pulled the district's disciplinary file for Darius Cole, the suspension notice, the expulsion committee minutes, the police report, the prosecutor's internal memo declining to pursue charges. She made a phone call to the district's legal counsel that afternoon. The tone of the call, according to the district's attorney who took it, was methodical and not particularly warm. That same week, Patricia Nwosu, a civil rights and plaintiff's attorney who had been retained by 11 families affected by the breach, received a call from one of her clients. The client had come across a comment on a community message board posted by someone who identified themselves as a Riverstone alumnus from 6 years prior. The comment referenced a black student who had been suspended and arrested for finding a hack in the school system, back when the portal was first set up. Patricia Nwosu was excellent at her job. She tracked the comment. She tracked the alumni forum thread it came from. She found corroborating mentions in 2 other places. She traced the timeline. She identified a name. She called Darius Cole on a Thursday evening. He answered on the 3rd ring. Nwosu et al. Versus Riverstone Unified School District was filed 4 months after the breach. The complaint named the district, the Board of Trustees, and Carl Weiss individually. It alleged negligent data security practices, discriminatory enforcement of school disciplinary policy, and, in the count, that Patricia Nwosu described publicly as the moral heart of the case, the deliberate suppression of a legitimate, actionable, and well-documented security disclosure from a minor student. Darius Cole's 6-year-old report was cited 22 times in the filing. Pre-trial discovery was extensive. IT vendor contracts were subpoenaed. 6 years of internal communications were produced. The 11 automated patch notification emails from the EduConnect vendor, all sitting unread in Carl Weiss's inbox, were entered into evidence as Exhibit 14. The prosecutor's memo from the juvenile case was Exhibit 7. Carl Weiss was deposed for 4 hours. He maintained throughout that he had acted appropriately based on the information he had at the time. He was asked whether he had read Darius's disclosure document in full before forwarding it to the vice principal. He said he had reviewed it. He was then asked about the remediation section, the portion that outlined exactly how to fix the vulnerabilities. He was asked to describe its contents. He could not. Helen Marsh, now 67 and retired from Education Administration, was deposed separately. She was measured, composed, and consistent in her account. The disciplinary decision had been appropriate given what she had been told by IT. She was asked whether she had read the disclosure document before issuing the suspension. She said she had relied on the summary from her IT director. She was asked whether, in retrospect, she believed the document should have been read in full before disciplinary action was taken. The deposition transcript records a pause of 6 seconds. That would have been the more thorough approach, she said. Darius Cole testified on a Friday in October. He wore a charcoal suit his mother had taken him to buy the weekend before. He was 23 years old. He sat at the witness stand with the stillness of someone who had been preparing for this, in one way or another, for 6 years. He spoke for 2 hours and 17 minutes. His recall of dates, times, emails, and specific technical details was so precise that opposing counsel objected twice, not on any legal grounds, but seemingly out of a reflexive instinct that something that thorough must somehow be wrong. Both objections were overruled. He described finding the vulnerability, writing the report until 2 a.m., printing the copies, handing one to Mr. Okafor, the meeting with Principal Marsh, the suspension notice folded into his backpack, the Tuesday morning with the police car, his mother in the doorway, the transfer to Westfield, the scholarship he didn't get, the 4 years of working 20 hours a week to fill a funding gap that shouldn't have existed. At one point, Patricia Nwosu asked him, "Mr. Cole, at 16 years old you found a significant vulnerability in the district system and you immediately disclosed it. Why?" He was quiet for a moment. He looked at the table in front of him, then back up. "Because that's what you're supposed to do," he said. "When you find something broken that could hurt people, you fix it, or you tell someone who can fix it. That's not hacking. That's just being responsible." The courtroom held that silence for a long moment. Nobody moved. Mr. Emmanuel Okafor, called as a supporting witness, testified for 35 minutes. He described the morning Darius handed him the printed report. He described his written statement to the district submitted the day of the arrest. He described what it felt like to submit that statement and watch nothing happen. "I spent 22 years teaching," he said. "I have had a lot of students. I will tell you plainly, what was done to Darius Cole was an injustice. It was not complicated. It was not ambiguous. A student did the right thing, and adults with institutional power decided that their discomfort was more important than his future. That's what happened. Riverstone Unified School District settled the case on a Thursday morning in December, 8 months after the breach became public, and 6 years and 2 months after Darius Cole had folded a suspension notice into his backpack in a principal's office. The settlement amount, $14.2 million. The terms included mandatory individual compensation payments to all affected families, a complete district-wide cybersecurity infrastructure overhaul to be completed within 18 months, a standing requirement for biennial third-party security audits of all district-operated platforms, the establishment of formal responsible disclosure protocols for any student or staff member identifying system vulnerabilities, and the creation of a student recognition and scholarship program in computer science and cybersecurity to be administered by an independent board. The district also issued a formal written public apology to Darius Cole. It acknowledged that his 2017 disclosure report had been legitimate, professionally produced, and actionable. It acknowledged that the disciplinary action taken against him had been both disproportionate and consequential. It stated, in language that Patricia Nwosu had negotiated across 4 weeks and multiple drafts, deep institutional regret for the harm caused to Mr. Cole and for the disruption to his educational opportunities. Carl Weiss's individual liability was resolved in a separate agreement. He paid a personal settlement figure that represented, by all accounts, a significant portion of his savings. He made no public statement. Helen Marsh released a statement through her personal attorney. It was 2 sentences. It expressed that she respected the legal process and wished Mr. Cole success in his career. Darius Cole did not respond to it publicly. The Riverstone settlement moved through education and technology policy circles within 48 hours of the press conference Patricia Nwosu held outside the courthouse. National outlets covered it not primarily as a data breach story, but as something harder to categorize. A story about what happens when institutions treat inconvenient truth as a threat to be neutralized rather than information to be acted upon. 3 neighboring school districts, within 6 weeks of the settlement being announced, voluntarily commissioned external security audits of their own student portal platforms. 2 of the 3 audits found critical vulnerabilities. Both districts issued patches within 30 days of receiving the reports. Neither made a public statement about what the audits had found. Vertex Shield promoted Darius to senior security analyst the following spring. His supervisor, Marcus Webb, sent a company-wide announcement that read, in its entirety, "Darius Cole has been with us for 2 years. In that time, he has demonstrated what genuine professionalism in this field looks like. Please read his case study if you want to understand what good documentation actually means. The Responsible Disclosure Fellowship, the scholarship fund named in the settlement terms, seeded in part by a portion of Darius's personal settlement allocation, awarded its inaugural grant 7 months after the case closed. The recipient was a 17-year-old girl from a public school in the eastern part of the state. Her application essay described finding a security flaw in her school's online attendance system and sitting with the decision of whether to report it for 3 full days, uncertain whether reporting it would get her in trouble or get it fixed. She reported it. She got the grant. Darius attended the award ceremony. He did not give a speech. He shook her hand, looked at her for a moment, and said something that no one else in the room heard. She nodded. Whatever it was, it seemed like enough. There's something that gets said in conversations about discrimination and institutional power that has the shape of wisdom, but functions more like sedation. The truth, always, comes out, as if truth moves on its own, as if it doesn't need someone to carry it, document it, protect it, refuse to let it be quietly buried in an archived email folder on a server that nobody checks. Darius Cole's truth was carried by a 3-page PDF, by a mother who kept a binder, by a teacher who filed a written statement that gathered dust for 6 years, by a prosecutor who wrote one honest memo, by a federal investigator who read an old email on a Tuesday morning and understood, in 30 seconds of silence, exactly what she was looking at. The truth came out. But it needed people. 6 years is a long time. A scholarship fund and a formal apology are meaningful things. And $14.2 million is a number that makes boards of trustees cancel their regular meetings and call emergency sessions instead. But what lingers, what stays with you after you've followed this story from a Tuesday morning with a police car to a press conference outside a courthouse, is the image of a 16-year-old at a desk at 2 in the morning, 2 monitors, sticky notes on the wall, writing a document called Submitted in Good Faith, building a section called Recommended Remediation, writing at the top, "My only goal is to make sure the school's systems are safe for students and staff." He didn't know what would happen when he submitted it. He couldn't have known. He just knew what was right, and he did it anyway. If this story is sitting with you right now, let it. Because here's the question it leaves behind. Who, today, is doing the right thing and being punished for it? And what would it take for us to be the person who refuses to let that happen? Think about that. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story, share it. Because sometimes the bravest thing in the world is 3 pages, submitted in good faith, time-stamped and waiting. This has been Justice Tales. The record is straight,